welcome to another episode of Calling Old Hollywood. I'm your host.
What's my name?
Kat Lively. I'm happy. I think I've found my place.
And I was also put on the board at the State June Hospital. Danny Thomas put me on. Danny Thomas has a park named after him on the south side of Toledo. And I have a park named after me on the north side of Toledo. It's the only city in the United States guarded by two noses.
There's a really cute story that you have about the Ginger Rogers dress.
Oh.
Do you want to use this mic?
Okay, yeah. Am I taking up too much time? No. Okay. A lot of the wardrobe I got was from the Fox wardrobe department. So I had things like from Betty Grable and from Ann Baxter and Judy Garland, and all the other people that did the show. So this one show we were doing a takeoff on Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And they found this gold lame dress that Ginger had worn in the movie, and they gave it to me to put on. And Kelly Nakahara, who's Nurse Kelly, she was supposed to be Fred Astaire. So we did the number like dancing cheek to cheek. Got big laughs and everything. And the next day it was on the air. And then after that, I'm in the commissary at 20th Century Fox, and I'm having lunch. And who's there? But Ginger Rogers. Wow. She's doing a guest spot on Love Boat, and she sees me. She comes over to me and says, "You know, Jamie, I saw that show last night with the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. You know that dress that you wore, that I wore in the movie?" I said, "Yes." She said, "It looked a hell of a lot better on you than it did on me."
On rehearsal days, when we could wear, our civilian clothes, Jamie would walk in and look at me and like finger a blouse and say, "Is that one of mine?"
What was it like? I've seen a few things from you talking about basically female integrity on set. It was such a different time back then. What was it? Were there things that you were asked to do that you didn't particularly want to? You really took pride in the character. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you bet. Well, no, on reflection, because I think sometimes it could be very difficult or trying or demanding or whatever. But 50 years later, I get mail from women all over the world who became nurses because of Major Houlihan. I get very emotional, and you shouldn't do that for a situation comedy. But it meant so much to me. When I took the job, I made an announcement. Nobody was listening. I said, "I'm going to be the best damn head nurse in Korea." And it was like half joking, but I took what she did very seriously. And as a result, the writers and I battled sort of to make her, you can be serious at your job and still be very funny. So that was the convincing you had to do. You didn't have to be slapstick, or you didn't have to look funny, or you could be pretty and funny. And she was a funny drunk, for example. And so a lot of that was growing pains. And I loved every moment of it, I have to admit. It was great to watch her develop that way and be allowed to do that. I was on Broadway doing Same Time Next Year, and I was on hiatus from MASH, and the writers as a group called me, and Jean and Larry Gelbart, and said in this conference call, "All right, how do you see what's coming up for her? What occurs to you? What's she gonna do next season? What do you see?" "Oh, well, just a moment, I have notes here. Yes, here she breaks off with Frank. She goes to Tokyo on R&R, and she meets a guy, not a doctor, who outranks Frank, and she falls in love and gets engaged and brings him back to the 407 7th. We did all of that. And I said, can you imagine Larry Linville? You can imagine what he's going to do with that. I'm going to walk in with, you know, my God there, and his broad shoulders, and Larry's going to tear off the mess tent. He's going to, you know. And so they said, yeah, this sounds great. You know, this says, and then what's going to happen? I said, they get married. And so Gene Reynolds said, well, that's so permanent. I said, Gene, you're divorced. How are you talking about? So we did that. I said, she finds out he was disloyal, and then she's back in town. We had a show that was called Hot Lips is Back in Town. And out of that came this very special relationship, friendship that I had with Hawkeye. And we had been adversaries, and here we get stuck behind enemy lines, and we turn to each other for solace, for comfort, for friendship and love. And everybody bought it. And Gene Reynolds, I remember Alan told me, because he wrote it for us. And he wrote it many years in advance of when we did it. But he said Gene felt the audience might not be ready to accept that from these two characters. Not our audience. Of course they do. And the same thing with Birthday Girls. I always say Jamie Farr won me an Emmy. We did an episode called Birthday Girls. I want to go to Tokyo. I want to get away from these doctors who pick on me and they don't appreciate me and so forth. I want to go have my birthday with you know, guys and who love me. And did the car just break down, or do we have a flat?
Yeah, the car breaks down, yeah.
And so I'm screaming at him, let's go, you promised you'd take me to the airport. And so here we are alone. It's getting dark. I'm feeling very sorry for myself, and I'm angry at him for no reason. And finally he spills out. I say to him, you know, what do you know? You know, it's my birthday. I wanted to go to my thing. And he said, well, gee, I didn't know it was your birthday. And I said, well, what do you care? And whatever, she's herself. And he goes and he finds this little cupcake and puts a match in it instead of a candle. And he comes over to me with it. And I say to him, I've always envied you. And he said, what? The way you talk about Toledo, the way you light up when you talk about Toledo. And he goes, yeah, Toledo is great. And she says, I've been there. So you have this wonderful relationship that the writers and the producers allowed us to explore and get all that juice from you never knew what's going to happen, that put these two strange people together and see what would happen. So there were those special times when you were allowed to continue to grow for Jamie and me. Both, you know, he had to give up his dresses and take over his company club because that's what happens. You grow. And it's hard in the beginning because they can't possibly imagine you're going to keep growing for 11 years. And so they do what's there imminently. And so it was, you never stopped growing as an actor too. But also, it had such humanity, the show. Harry Morgan, if you took a poll, I'd say to everybody on MASH, who was your favorite? They would, to a man, am I wrong? Right. They would say Harry. You know, we love each other, but Harry was our person. Harry was giving an interview, and the interviewer said, do you feel MASH has made you a better actor? And he said, gee, I don't know about that, but it's made me a better person. And that was the info. That was our Harry. That was our Harry. But you were faced with those kind of things every day in every script. There was something that was challenging, demanding, and that's why 50 years later, happy anniversary to us, it's still so relevant. you watch a MASH today and it's like, it's happening now. And that was in the 50s, shot in the 70s, the 50s. And it was glory to play a woman who could find that kind of power and that kind of strength to stand up and do that in the 50s, because that was tougher even than it was for me in the 70s. But we're here.
Bob, you went on to, did you host the Rose Bowl parade for quite a little bit too?
Well, I did the Rose Parade for 34 years, and on the Hallmark Channel, and in California it was on KTLA Channel 5. But I had some funny things happen there too. I remember Roy Rogers was the Grand Marshal one year, and he and Dale Evans were sitting up in the back of a limousine, and Roy forgot to go to the bathroom. So he peed in his boot. Okay, anywho, on the Newlywed Game, I'll just tell you a couple of Newlywed stories. One time, I asked this lady, I said, what's the one thing your husband told you not to talk about? She said, well, my husband and my cousin are gonna kill my uncle for the insurance. And what made it so funny is that when the husband came back in, he matched the answer. Then, one time we got a call from a lady, and she said, I need to talk to someone. I said, what's going on? She said, well, I saw my husband with some woman on the Newlywed Game, and I have no idea who she is. Come to find out, this jerk, he kind of messed up the marriage license there and went on television with his mistress. Now that is stupid. But all I could say was whoopee, you know? and where whoopee came from is that they wanted me to say make love, and I wouldn't do it, because I didn't think you should have to explain that to your children until you were ready to do so. So Frank Sinatra had a hit record called Making Whoopee, and whoopee became a 4-letter word, folks, and that's how it all came about.
So many have been influenced by all of you up here, your characters, women becoming nurses, people becoming actors. Who were you all influenced by? Jimmy, you want to start with you?
Well, I think my characters are like, not characters, whatever, but comedian-wise, my people are not known anymore. No one knows who my people are. My two favorites were, only one, Dick Gregory, was one of my guys. And then one who nobody knows, and I lived a sad life, but really a good comic, was Garfield Cambridge.
Oh, yeah.
They know Garfield, I know they know Dick Gregory, but those are my two favorite comedians. My character, whatever, and I use his stuff or whatever evolved from his stuff, and people always say, that was Art Carney. Art Carney, in terms of comedy, if you look at that show, to me, because I'm really a comic aficionado guy, I watch a lot of comedy, that show to me was the best show in comedy from this standpoint. There was no props, there was no nothing, it was just two guys, face to face, bang, bang, that was it. No guest stars, no nothing, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, knocking it out. I loved it.
Loretta, who were you influenced by?
I love his passion. I love it. Who inspired me, right? I've wanted to be an actor since I had a thought in my head, truly. I can't remember wanting to be anything else. And later on, I discovered when I was in classes that I've been rehearsing all my life. I would turn out all the lights in my bedroom as a little kid and get under the covers, put a light on under the covers, and read books. And I would do all the parts in the books. You know, I'd be crying, I'd do, and all the parts, men, women, children, animals, whatever, I would do it. And, you know, put the light out, it's tough, you know, and I'm sleeping. No, well, I went on to dance classes and I sang in the choir, so I was always out there cheerleading, majorette, doing that stuff. No, I knew that you all were my life. Talking to audiences, reaching out and touching hearts and feelings and laughing and crying together. That was what I wanted to do more than anything. So I left my environment. Nobody ever did that. And there I was, a kid, and my mother said, "You're killing your father and me." My father was delighted with it. "You're killing me and your father." But she threw her little, but she was 5 foot nothing, threw her body across the door and said, "You can't do this." Years later, I said, "You wonder where I got my dramatic license." You know, anyway, I said, "Mom, you know, I love you. I'd die for you, but I can't live for you. I can't do what you want me to do. So I gotta go." So I was inspired by certain actresses, I think more than others, although we have this wealth of talent. Probably Ingrid Bergman from the very beginning. And I remember watching some of her work with one of my agents, and he said, "That's you. You're always honest. You give them your truth, your honesty in your heart. You'll never fail yourself or the audience. You always give them your honesty and your best work." And she did that for me. But there, I would say more than anyone. And then eventually it turned out, as I went reflecting, well, a lot of them were British. They were all, you know, Maggie Smith I worship. And so, but great work continues to inspire me. I will watch a film over and over and over because it's a so great film. You said, "Why, that moment, you never saw that before. You play it again." And it's like going to school for me. I went to dailies every day. Some people can't watch themselves. I was going to school. I was learning, you know, so I've been in love with what we do all my life. I love the give and take from me to you and you back to me. And that's, to me, it's theater, because that's a romance. You're on stage alone, you're alone on stage. The people out there without a person on stage, it's just a mob, an army, a lot of people. Together, we make magic. We make magic. You watch, you listen, you respond, we look and we talk and we engage. And I think the arts will ever be the salvation of our society, the salvation of our humanity, because it keeps us honest and true and real and human.
Bob, who are you inspired by?
Oh boy, well, I sort of pioneered the rock and roll concert industry, and I'm very proud of that. But I think that the one person that inspired me a lot was Monty Hall. Such a gay guy, such a wonderful guy. But I will tell you that game show hosts are unusual sometimes. Chuck Berry was doing, Chuck Woolery, not Chuck Berry. Sorry about that one. Chuck Woolery was doing Wheel of Fortune. He was making $5,000 a week. And Merv Griffin owned the show. And he went to Merv and he said, "I want $10,000 a week." The show was doing pretty well. And Merv said, "Yo, get out of here. I'll give you $7,500. Well, Chuck quit. And they hired Pat Sajak for $2,500. Wow. And Pat Sajak is now making about $2 million a year, and Van is making a little over $1 million. And they're wonderful people. They really are. But Monty Hall, he sat down with me one time and he told me about watching people, how they move, and you can, people don't want to know about you. They want you to know about them. That's the one thing. And on Newlywed Game, if I got a funny answer, I would immediately look at the other. I could tell by their body language I was going to get another funny answer from them. But Monty taught me a lot, and he was such a good guy. And I did a Newlywed Game on the Game Show Network with game show hosts and their wives. And Monty told a story, no, his wife told a story, that he got stuck in the bathtub one time and they had to call 911 to get him out. And, but that was my last conversation with Monty, but he was a good guy. He sat with me. He told me, you know, that, like I say, people don't want to know about you. And I'll give you a little clue how it's worked for me. If you go into a meeting with someone you've never met before, and you go into the meeting and the first thing you do, this is what I do, is that you take a look around and see what kind of pictures the gentleman has on his desk, or see what kind of things are on, and ask a question about that. Oh, is that your daughter? How long has she been? The moment you show interest in them, they will show interest in you. It works every time. And I learned a great deal just by things like that. The game show host that I didn't get along too well with was Bob Barker. People will come up to me and say, "Hey, you're Bob Barker, aren't you?" And I'll get real rude to them, and they say, "That Bob Barker's an idiot." But anyway, I shared a dressing room with Barker at CBS. When he was there, I wasn't, and vice versa. But up on the wall was this big, beautiful thing that said WGMC on it. And being the jerk I am, I one day took it off the wall and put it under the couch. So I'm out at the ranch and we're roping cattle. I get an emergency phone call from Jonathan Goodson. "Where's Barker's plaque?" I said, "What plaque?" He said, "Don't mess with me, man. We're supposed to do 5 shows today and he has refused to go on until we find the plaque." I said, "Oh, for God's sakes, it's under the couch." He said, I said, "What does WMC mean?" He says, "World's Greatest MC." So anyway, Monty Hall was mine.
Jamie?
Before I tell you mine, I just want you to know that I know Loretta Swit's mother, Nell. She lived to be 105 years old, and she was the most wonderful
106.
woman. And there were 103?
6.
106. That's better than the stock market. Yeah.
Never called her Mrs. Swit. It was Nell. No, Nell and Jamie. There was like, you know, this thing. And she was always thrilled to go to the FARR house for the holidays. And there's a long driveway that goes up, and she would look up and she'd say, "Jamie lives in a castle." You know, so, "No, Ma, it's a house up a hill. You know, it's a castle." She would say, "Jamie's my favorite on MASH in public." I'd say my mother means next to me. No, I didn't. Jamie's my favorite. I mean, she was relentless. Jamie. So, but occasionally now, Mom eventually wound up at the motion picture home, which is not too far from the castle. And Jamie, like, I wouldn't even know this is going on. Jamie would stop in and visit with her, okay? Now, a couple of weeks later, "Oh, well, Jamie told me when he came up." I said, "Excuse me, yo, Jamie came to see me the other day." Jamie didn't mention it to me, you know. But it was, it meant so much to her, you know. It just was, you know, he's probably the loveliest man I know.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to know my favorite? Okay, I turned 88 years old, so I grew up with radio. I loved radio. And Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock, of course, as a kid, you had to go to bed at night because you got school. But Bob Hope was on NBC at like 9 o'clock, and Red Skelton was on at 9:30. So my mother said, you can listen to Bob Hope, but you gotta go to bed at 9:30. So I got a crystal set. And I said, okay, Ma. And I get under the covers and I put the crystal set and I listened to Red Skelton on the radio. He was my favorite. Anyway, later I come to Hollywood and I did a pilot for CBS called The Mighty O. It was a Navy show. It starred Craig Stevens, Lola Albright, Alan Hale Jr., and Richard Jaco. And I was this Navy guy called Schnorkel. I always get these great names, right? Flinger, Schnorkel. So at any rate, he's a guy that could smell anything, and they had this chef that was with them. And the pilot didn't sell. But Sherwood Schwartz, who you all know, Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch of that, was Red Skelton's head writer. So he said, you know, one of the characters that Red hasn't come up with is a military character. He says, you know, even though, let's take the kid with the big nose, and we'll give Red Skelton the chef's part. And this is now live television, okay? So they write a script, Sherwood writes a script, and I'm playing his buddy, and Red's playing it. Now, this is live TV, and Red Skelton likes to ad-lib. And there's a half-hour show. You know, if he starts to ad-lib, they're eating up time with their thing. So I'm this kid, I'm like maybe 20 years old, you know, with him, carrying half the show with him. And the whole thing is we find this little Korean baby, and he wants to adopt it. And the only way you can adopt the baby, the ship is coming into San Francisco, is if he's married. So Red Skelton dresses me up as his wife. That's the first time I did something in drag. Anyway, the audience went crazy and Red's ad-libbing, and I'd have to make an entrance or something, and they're telling me, cut out page 22 and 23. And what the hell's on 22 and 23? He's got the cue cards. I'm getting, you know, 18, 20 years old, I've got to remember what it is. Anyway, the show was a big hit. And I came back and I did several more of them, and then I got drafted into the real army. And I wound up in Japan and Korea. And I actually went through a MASH units in Korea. And at that time, Red's son, Richard, was 12 years old, died from leukemia. So Red wanted to do something for the military. And unlike Bob Hope, he wanted to do shows in Korea, but he didn't want to take a big camera crew with him. He just wanted to do encampments and by himself. So he requested me from the State Department. I was a private, and I got VIP status and flew on a United Nations airplane, and we traveled all the way across Korea in little encampments all over the place, and went all the way up to the DMZ, all the way up to the 38th parallel, entertaining the troops. He was just Red, and I introduced him and do whatever he needed for props and that. He used to do Guzzler's gin. You know, remember he used to, he'd put water in the thing, and Guzzler's gin is smooth, you know, and he'd do all his routine. By the end of the thing, he's really good. Anyway, they'd call and they say, what do you need for props? We said we need a stool and a gin bottle. Well, they thought we needed a bottle of gin, so they thought we were knocking off a bottle of gin at every stop like that. So the air helicopters would land, and there'd be a general coming out with martinis on a tray. And Red and I looking at, boy, these guys are drinking around here. They're thinking we're drinking it. So anyway, Red decides to go back to the United States. He said to me, you know, he said, when you come back to the United States, he says, it may be difficult for you to get jobs again. So if you're in trouble, you come and see me, all right? So I come home, this was the day after Hawaii was made a state, and I get back into to California and ready to start my career again, and my father died. So my mom didn't have any money or anything, and I needed to quit the business. So I went to see Red to say goodbye to him at CBS. And he said, no, you're not. He said, I told you, if anything happened, you come and see me. Pulled out a wad of $100 bills, gave them to me, he said, send that home to your mother, you're working for me. So he put me under contract. And I worked all of the famous nightclubs all over the United States with Red. And we played the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach, the Chez Paris in Chicago, the Moulin Rouge in Los Angeles, the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, and he actually saved my career, and he was my idol as a kid. Can you imagine that? I have a St. Christopher medal here that I wore, that he gave me in the Army, and I still wear it to this day. He says, your friend, Red Skelton. So, yeah.
Do we have some time to get some questions for the audience? No, we're out of time. Well,
No, we're not.
right.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all very much. You're wonderful. Really.
Jimmie, Kat, Eubanks.